Hello, everybody. Welcome. Before I get started today, well, let's start with the good stuff. So, the sun, this world, the living beings, the living places, the more than living beings, the more than merely living ways, the transcendence beyond what we call intelligence, which is mostly a bunch of traps for humans. Fascinating and brilliant though they are. The hummingbird, the bee, the whale, the octopus, the ocean, the mountain, the garden, the oak tree, the trillions and trillions and trillions of bacteria on this world. Each one as simultaneously simple and complex as the universe and that which produces it. I honor these beings, these ways of being. And I dishonor the machines that obliterate them. I'm so grateful to have this moment, this time together, to learn and explore and grow, to unforget, to dream, to remember our origins, our true natures, the vast, the more than infinite possibility space of our human incarnations and all our incarnations. Presuming that anything like that exists, I think what actually exists is far stranger and more radical than that. But we have toys in concept, in language. Deep gratitude to all of you who listen and those who support my work, particularly Mr. N and Ms. E, two brilliant spirits, and my primary supporters. Yeah, I have about two. They're very beautiful, though. I love them. We take care of each other. It's a sunny spring day here in San Francisco. I'm out for a walk, which these days is a truly miraculous thing to be doing for me. Relatively commonplace for many of us. Not so for me. It's a little breezy. Hopefully my windscreen, my improvised windscreen, a cotton ball with a bread wire around it will take care of most of the noise.
During the day or normal time, it's actually not a big problem because you just follow who's ahead of you when you turn. It's the turn with that different.
So, you know, there's a number of purposes underneath my walk and talks. Um, Someone who I love recently described me as morbidly grandiose, megalomaniacal, incredibly boring, insufferably boring, and someone no one should follow. And I was grateful for the severity of his not tongue-in-cheek criticism. Though I admit it was kind of surprising to get a message like this out of the blue from a dear companion. Yeah. I've certainly had my struggles with arrogance throughout my life, and even recently. It's a difficult demon to manage, and it rises primarily from insecurity, as should be obvious. When you see people attempting to publicly demonstrate their excellence, it's usually a mixture, and it tends to come down on one side or the other mostly. It's a mixture of insecurity, particularly if they're bragging. Brilliant people, amazing people definitely avoid bragging. Unless, I mean, there's a sort of playful way of not taking oneself seriously and lampooning oneself, right? But if you see somebody seriously bragging, this often indicates that actually they're very insecure, and if they really had ability, skillfulness, intelligence, awareness, they would probably either remain silently adoring of those around them, or they would enact the skillfulness and brilliance that instead they speak of. Of course, our humanity is complex enough that we can invert the procedure and become hilariously self-deprecating, which is in a way an enaction of the potentials. We can highlight our insecurities, all of these kinds of things. Humans are most lovable when they're playful with each other and remain aware of the grave unseriousness that's hidden right inside the terrifying seriousness of physical existence and mental existence and so forth. So I have a few purposes. One of them is to simply keep my insight mind alive by feeding it. If we're not spending time with others who are brilliant and seeking insight and liberation and playful mutual development, we've got to invent games to keep our faculties from atrophy. And as I age, memory and vocabulary and the organs of my explorative, detective-like, synergizing mind, they need a place to play. And so these walk and talks become that playground for me. There's also, there are some selfish motivations, if we want to call them that, to draw brilliant and uniquely minded others into to draw each other into our mutual orbits so that we can learn and grow together, because I'm vastly more skillful and playful with another or a small group than I can be by myself. And so those of you who listen, you are part of that group, because even though I may not know you and perhaps we haven't spoken together, I imagine you out there listening, wondering, learning what insights you may arrive at from the little seeds that I distribute in the electrosphere. So this is my school, my playground, my gymnasium. And then there are other features where I just want to return with interest the amazing gifts that nature and time and light and being and the living world has bestowed on me, to fertilize the field and honor and adore all those beings who strive for liberation, to embody the spirit of beauty, virtue, origin, intelligence, transcendence, awareness. So those are a few of the things that I can easily say. Those few things are modest compared to what underlies them. Which is a profound desire for answers to the strange problems that have plagued our species. I don't know what was going on with us historically, though I've been given deep glimpses of that. But I know what it's like to be a human in 2025. And I mean, that's as diverse as you can imagine. There are humans who are astonishingly trans-privileged, right? In the sense of they have escaped entirely in this lifetime the vast majority of what the rest of the humans will concern themselves with and suffer from and be frightened of and so forth. They are essentially gods on earth. And then all the way down to the person who has so little that they don't have water, they don't have food, they're dying, or they're so badly injured that it's not clear they will live another day, or they're trapped in a prison, or they're being trafficked, or dominated inescapably. So what it means to be a human in 2025 is a vast array of continua, from the most liberated by wealth to the most liberated by insight. And those people are uncommon, except that most of us probably start out that way in early childhood, and then we get ruined by language and enculturation and socialization and so forth. So I don't actually know what it's like. I imagine, and I have my experience to draw from. Today, I was just listening to a talk with Eric Weinstein. It's about 8 months old. It was pre-election. And as usual, Eric's sharp and artful. He's a lot like some of the people he admires, musicians, perhaps basketball players, fighters, authors, scientists. But he's extremely lithe, right? His physical form belies his interiority. That mind is astonishing. And I enjoy listening to him. He sharpens my mind. And I learn something new every time I hear him speak. And, one of his favorite topics is one of my favorite topics, which is how epochs are captured and weaponized and broken, and then we're sold back the shards of what we might otherwise have become together, and this is fundamentally conspiratorial, and the conspiracy has so many faces that it would terrify a hydra. Right? A hydra would just start calling for its mommy and flee. The many-headed snake. And I'm deeply aware of these matters. I've studied them most of my adult life and been concerned with them since childhood, although in childhood I could not articulate them. I merely had emotions about them. Well, merely, I don't know why I use that word. I simply had emotions. Like really simple emotions like, why is this person being mean or cruel? Why are there prisons? How could there possibly be war on this planet? Why are the people lying to one another? Why are the adults lying? Why are my parents lying? Most of the time when they speak, except perhaps when they are being loving. Less lying than that. And we moderns live in a labyrinth of highly weaponized lies and lethal processes, just as if there were demons. I've spoken about this in many of my previous recordings. It doesn't matter. Given the way that we live and what we are living in and what we are subjected to, it makes no difference whatsoever whether there are metaphysical demons or just the kinds that humans make. The outcome is very similar, if not the same. And the humans become demons wherever they lose their awareness and obedience to origin, mutual concern, the living places, the sun, the sky, each other, children, all the kinds of children. So we certainly live in a conspiratorial mess, and the conspiracy doesn't have to be conscious to be powerful. It doesn't have to be an evil person or an evil cohort, the Illuminati. It doesn't require that. Occam's razor is useful here. The simplest explanation suffices, even if it doesn't encompass the entire continuum. Right? The simple explanation is defection. dissociation, disembodiment, which is amplified and accelerated by material culture, commerce, power mongering, the imperatives that underlie the continued existence of the prison, industrial, banking, information complex. One of the secret problems here is actually just size. The larger a cohort becomes, or the larger their reach, their grasp within the representational layer that the humans create, the more evil they become. We are a small group, intimate, pod-like animals like dolphins or whales. And we are easily captivated by representations of power, wealth, or excellence. Think for yourself for a moment what the opposite of a corporation is. Something so virtuous that its mistakes are as beautifully powerful as its successes, and support all of life and being. Try to imagine the opposite of a bomb. It blows things into ecstatic efflorescent unity, anamnesis, playful mutual healing, wonder. These are accessible to our people, these ways of being. And one day, I hope tomorrow, we will enter into the actual possibility space of our communal, natural, and human natures, and explore there together for the sake of all beings. So it's true, we live in a vast conspiracy, vast array of conspiracies, and it doesn't have to be that there's someone in the cockpit. In fact, surprisingly, no one in the cockpit is more effective, right? Because the absence of a loving, aware, insightful, virtuous, wise, and careful human being at the helm of something might be even more powerful than the presence of a kind of a demoniacal human. But there's a much weirder secret underneath all this. A much stranger and unfamiliar conspiracy. Perhaps the right word would be unexpected. And it's, for me, the conspiracy of daring. There's nothing as compellingly deceptive or damaging as my personal identity, right? The thing I must protect at all costs, never set down, and live within the strange confines of until crisis, catastrophe, a magic genie or death comes and shatters that prison that I think is myself. I'm really into this jailbreak thing. My personal identity loves that idea. Isn't that ironic? The very thing that keeps me in my own little personal prison and manages it so efficiently, so effectively, that very thing loves the idea of getting other people out of prisons. It's what I refer to. I came up with this phrase a few weeks ago, which I think is hilariously brilliant and mysterious. It's an ironic counterpose, right? So I pose as the liberator of others in this game, while I ever more severely imprison myself. And in fact, that pose is part of my personal prisoneering. There's a guy walking like 12 dogs, and they're so coherent that I think either the guy's got a secret, or he's an angel, or both. I mean, how do you walk 12 dogs in total coherence? It's just... I mean, it's one of the greatest analogies of the potential for coherence that I've ever encountered. So the real conspiracy is the conspiracy of personal identity, and this is what most of the traditions, right, they pose the key, but it seems like a huge amount of work and very difficult and uncertain to undertake the quest that might result in our escape from personal identity. And so we rail against the external conspiracies from within a prison of our own devising. And this is also an ironic counterpose. Yeah. Very sophisticated. There's a technology at play here, but it's not physical. In fact, it's the technology that produces the physical technologies as implementations of its protocols. It's amazing stuff to look at with a clear and open mind.
I guess it's pink today, huh? That's peach. Oh, look at you. To me, that's peach. How about this one?
What turned me on to this today is that I've recently been reading Greg Kaminsky's book, Entangled with Sunlight, in preparation for a conversation with him, which I will have soon. And I found the beginning of the book quite boring. But then he turns to this topic after, decades of interviewing other people, hundreds of interviews with occultists and practitioners of spiritual systems. And then he finally came to a teacher, a tantric Tibetan, I think, Rinpoche. His name escapes me at the moment. And sometime around like the second chapter of the book, he starts in on talking about what actually changed his life, his way of being in the world. And he realized the necessity of putting the personal identity aside. Now, it turns out that, weirdly, that having a personal identity is an important preparation for most of us. There might be some exceptions. Most things have exceptions. In fact, maybe there's an exception to anything we can state confidently in language. It turns out that the personal identity can be a kind of a fuel or a catalyst, right, that can be turned into energy when it's penetrated, and that energy can propel us into what is usually called emptiness in many traditions, but this emptiness is very much not nothing. It's more like infinitely layered modes of pure undifferentiated potential. You know, E equals mc squared, that E refers to, can be understood to refer to this emptiness. And it's not merely energy. You know, we have these words, they don't, they blind us to most, they tend to blind us to what they're pointing at by giving us a token, and we can understand how the token works, so that the problem is that we internally transfer that felt sense of understanding of how the token works. We're confused, and we can't tell that that doesn't mean that we understand the referent, what it's pointing at. And nearly none of us understand the referent. If by understanding we mean intimacy, filial familiarity, I and thou are more than merely one together. So the really profound conspiracy, and the one that generates the external versions, their birthplace, is the fallacy of personal identity, fiction. And then, you know, it's possible to have mostly integral personal identity, but for that to happen, it's got to be like the membrane on a bubble of emptiness, right? Or the core of a bubble of emptiness, or switching back and forth between those two, where emptiness is this pure, undifferentiated potential, the nature of being as origin embodied in an organism and disembodied at the same time. I know this all sounds crazy. I don't care. Because nothing I can say is half as crazy as the prisons that have been erected around us. But what was in my mind was that there surely have been and exist today communions of humans, usually small groups, with high coherence and less prisoneering, and more integrity, that protect the integrity of their ways of being and nurture and develop it together. And this can happen with any two humans if they simply agree to do this. It doesn't take more than 5 minutes. Although to get depth and continuity from this game, you have to more or less play it all the time, which is part of what the goal of meditation is. To get us to taste the space outside personal identity, which is hard to do within the prison of personal identity, or the prisoneered communal identities that we call nations, states, cities, societies, courtrooms, militaries, companies, all these things. So it turns out that these external conspiracy protocols, here's the old raccoon mother and her baby. Baby spriteful, sprightly. They really shouldn't be awake in the daytime, but one of her eyes is damaged and she can't see very well, and she's probably not long for this world. But her child is with her. She's a beautiful being. So it may be that she's awake in the daytime because foraging is easier and the threat landscape is different. Particularly the problem for her is dogs and coyotes, though cats could also be a problem. Okay, so here's what I'm trying to get at. The dissociated imperatives of the prison of personal identity, these produce their extended versions in human social behavior. All those bad things I was talking about a minute ago, right? That whole process is also an ironic counterpose. Every one of those things presents itself as heroic, world-saving, superhuman, magical, a god. And the difference between the representation and what is being represented is infinite. Just go infinitely in the other direction. So you can see how dissociation from origin, what we could call our true nature, which is always, it's like a shining star inside us that we work very furiously to occlude and then to represent the absences of. I do this. I am aware of these things, and yet I am still trapped in them at the same time. Though I work, I'm trying to unbuild the prison, which that by itself is ironic because it turns out that to unbuild the prison you have to stop trying and just be. But that's very threatening to the features of my interiority that I am familiar with and I've become habitually subservient to over my lifespan. And those features don't have to be destroyed necessarily, but they do have to be spun down. If I want liberation. Now here's the thing. In the old traditions, ancient traditions of Greece, Egypt, Africa, other places deep in the frozen backwaters of what we call the Soviet Union or USSR or China, Indonesia, island places, Hawaii, all these places, right? There were methods to deal with this problem. And they involved often a ritual process preceded by purification and education, in which the arbiters of our interiority would flip over. Right? One can imagine this in terms that Ian McGilchrist might frame to us. He postulates that features of left hemispheric-like ways of being in the world have overcome the sovereignty of their own origin in the right hemispheric ways of being in the world, which resemble those of the gods. They're intrinsically virtuous, creative, playful, insightful, loving, but also despairing. Yeah. So in this process, the wrongful sovereigns of our social and personal interiority are put to death. We die. We undergo a death experience. And undergoing this, we see, actually, it's not really seeing, we become the other way. We see what is beyond incarnation. We become what is beyond incarnation. And having done so, we cannot then be frightened into compliance with nonsense, and the stars of our origin take their place in the direction of our interiority and our behavior. So it's a reestablishment of the right stars, the natural stars. And this doesn't destroy the other, the dissociative, left hemisphere-like aspects. Like a terrified dog that is attacking nearly everything it comes into contact with and would prefer a dead world. It brings that dog into coherent relation with virtue, which is what the dog actually wants in this analogy. So it restores the trustworthy sovereign. I once quipped that the true sovereign of the sacred throne never sits there, right? Which is a play on words that illustrates, see, there's kind of two modes of absence, right? There's the absence of virtue, and then there's like the presence of virtue, which is the absence of its opposites. And this is very profound. We're trained to drink the not water of our modernity. And we've been doing it for so long that we're terrified that there might be actual water. And were it to be introduced, most of us would flee. So we live in this strange conundrum. And while the path to liberation is uniquely personal for each of us, we need each other. We need each other's support and encouragement, reassurance, inspiration. Though again, the path can be and must be personally traversed. In the old rituals, each one goes alone into obliteration and oblivion of terror, death, and is in that womb transformed. Or what's the opposite of transformed? Like, the simple word is corrected, but these were healing rituals, but strangely the healing involved dying or even being vivisected, right? Being torn to shreds and then reassembled. This is a trenchant motif in many ancient traditions. Maria Marigu, the Greek mystagogue who initiates people in the Mysteries of Elefsina, has a book which I haven't read, I hope to, called The Divinization of Man, originally written in Greek. She is an avatar, a living avatar of Greek wisdom. And so, in his very strange and warlike way, is Ammon Hillman. But he's more of an avatar of the forbidden, in my view. And he's much more of a sword to Marigo's scalpel, in my view. However, Hillman keeps his depths hidden. I don't get the sense that Marigo is occluding her way. I think she is her way. Whereas Hillman is triply faced in a very provocative, a very personal and profound way. I love them both. One difference is that there are different kinds of paths that humans take. Many of the most brilliant of us undergo or set themselves up for martyrdom. And others just become these kinds of stars in eternity. But it's very important to understand that for liberty to be present, the personal self must be placed in subservience to beauty. And the spirit of truth, which is not a true statement. Statements are fundamentally untrue. They're also a method of displacing. I use this all the time. I'm guilty of all the things. I'm a human being. However, an ironic counterpose can be turned to virtuous use. It's always better to just be transparently virtuous. But in the absence of that potential, we can play, right? Obviously, if there were no use in writing or speaking, I would be virtuously silent. And the virtue of silence, once again, these are principles, not laws, right? There are myriad exceptions. But the virtue of silence nearly always transcends.
He doesn't have to, it'll show that. Right. And then I'll come as soon as I can. Yeah, show me. Look at him. Yeah.
Right. I owe 250,000.
Because silence is like that pure undifferentiated potential, but speech differentiates, you see. That similitude is powerful. It's not explicit. This is what I mean. It's a principle, not a law. Shadow of a hawk passed before me. Seeing the shadow, I looked up and saw the hawk. You see? This is the this is the power of the ironic counterpose. Right? The shadow, the representation, where the hawk is subtracting light vertically and making a ghost on the ground, properly understood, can lead us to the actual hawk. And the hawk is itself a kind of shadow of origin, a living shadow, like we are, that can lead us to that which produces it. Not just produced it in history, is producing it now. There is no other real thing. That whole history thing, that's a bunch of game playing. This moment, right now, is where the real is alive and the prospect of liberty is accessible. So it's not surprising we fear death. Death is the end of the personal fictions, and there are those who are desperate to preserve those fictions at any cost, including everything. This is what makes our species so dangerous. Because the left hemispheric-like personal identity aspects and the projections of those aspects into our societies and cultures is lethal to our natures in both senses, right? It kills them, it kills living beings, destroys them, wantonly, without any semblance of concern. And it wants to perpetuate that process at all costs. Now, I simultaneously love the unique personal identities of the humans that I know, and even my own. They're not only bad, but they stand in the way of something so true and profound, so worthy of adoration and reverence, that we should see through the shadow to the hawk, and through the hawk to the sun, and through the sun to the sky, and through the sky to that of which it is the child. We walk together in the valley of the shadow of death. And it does look like the horrifying things, war and prison, hatred. But it also looks like the restaurant, Amazon, Google, Facebook, automobiles. The truck rolls by, it says Cisco, at the heart of fucking, I don't know what, I can't remember, thankfully I lost it. And there's two human hands holding two halves of an avocado, one with a seed in it, one without. I mean, the metaphor there is so profound, right? Like, it's literally that seed picture is like the two hemispheres of the mind, that which is present. Oh yeah, it's even worse because, no, let's see, it's reversed. So in this image, the avocados are shaped like a heart. Oh yeah, Cisco at the heart of food and service. Yeah, not fucking likely. So the left side has the seed and the right side has the absence of the seed. And this is made even more ironic because as a child, in my early teens, my best friend was Perry Cisco. And his dad owned the Cisco trucking company at that time. And we lived in a town called Stockton. Stock up. Oh my. I lost my train of thought. I love the, if we don't take it seriously, so the problem with the prison is that of our personal identity is that we take it seriously. Very afraid of any threat to it. When the threat to it is our only hope to escape. But as I've spoken of in previous videos, we're terrified of doing something unfamiliar for a reward that can't be quantified. And one of the most terrifying things is an infinite reward, an unending flow of pure ecstasy and liberation, insight, wonder, awe, skillfulness. Because this would obviate everything that the sort of prison of the personal self identifies with. So any threat to that prison is a threat to the aspect. It's a threat to the hawk's shadow, which in our case has overcome the hawk and the sun and the sky and like the whole ladder of being. Right? So it's very difficult for us to release our death grip on personal identity. I work at this, which is the wrong way to go about it. But at least I have a toe in the water. Right? I meditate. I have other practices too that create at least the semblance of a context in which the self can safely fade to the background without it being terrifying. Although if it ever starts to completely fade, I tend to freak out. Which, is natural. Just like a child learning to walk, I need to be assured that I'm not just going to be destroyed. But then, who's being assured? It's my personal identity. The destruction I'm afraid of is the end of the prison of Darren. A few times during my meditation practice, the personal self started to become more or less transparent. And this was almost always followed by whatification. What's this? What's going on? What's happening? And that collapse of awareness toward denotation, explication, identification. Oh, it's this. That is the end of that process of dying to the personal self, and is its common reestablishing aspect. I'm honestly not trying to demonize the personal selves. Just there's usually a ladder where we start out kind of without a personal self, and then we develop one, and then it can become transformed into power to effect that flipping over that Maria Marigu instigates as part of her way of being a beautiful human, an angelic human. I would differentiate here a couple of concepts. One is ignorance, and the other is unknowingness. To resist the gravity of knowledge and enter into blissful communion of intimate awe. That's different from ignorance. Ignorance tends to be a symptom of stuckness. The incredible green of the plants of this world. So profound. You know, amazingly, we don't have to seek death and we don't have to die to be reincarnated. We can undergo this process that we've heard noises about in traditions of reincarnation while alive, which I've had a taste of. I know it's real. This thing, sometimes called the second birth, which is to be reborn while yet incarnate. But there's even something more profound than that. There is a waterfall within us of infinite rebirthings, moment to moment, in a flow that every movement of this flow exceeds the previous movement. It sounds terrifying, and you know, getting rid, quote unquote, transparencing our personal identity is a lot of, quote, work. And it's not fun. Even to sit in meditation for me, for, you know, the minimal amount of time that I do it per day, say like half an hour, is very challenging. It's physically difficult. My mind keeps bubbling up thoughts and concerns. I have to refocus and refocus and refocus. Similarly to when I'm practicing the piano. Not similarly to when I am composing music. Because when I am composing music, my soul is becoming music, which I think is so close to its natural way of being, much closer than what I usually am up to in any case. There's a turtalic quorum here, a bunch of turtles, and also some koi, and one of the koi, carp actually, it has a florid tumor-like growth on its left side. Which is almost surely the result of the chemistries used in this fake lake to kill algae. The tumor looks like flowers. It looks like both an injury and a collection of orange flowers. Tiny flowers. There's an Asian man walking in front of me. He's got a rod, a short rod, black, with covered in cloth, and at the end of it are two large balls, and it looks precisely like he's carrying a model of a penis. It's very peculiar. One begins to wonder about synchronicities at this point, right? Where there's symbolic transformation of circumstance.
She's a young adult, but she's fully grown.
Yeah.
But her behavior is
Meditation is difficult, it's challenging, it's a lot of work. But compared to the work you will have to do to remain in prison, that amount of work is trivial. This is kind of the big secret. Do you want to work all your life to erect and trap yourself and others in a prison that you're not even aware exists? Or do you want to do the work to free yourself once and for all of this trap? And when someone is freed this way, that freedom, that liberation, becomes like a star in an invisible dimension that is as powerful as physical reality. It rescues all beings. Right? It's not just a personal transformation. And this is one of the virtues that arises when human beings are liberated from this trap. Now, there are paths of liberation that are not simply meditation. There are intellectual paths, even. There are paths of adoration and devotion. Every mother who's ever existed, and many fathers, have given up personal identity to care for other beings. Or they've merged personal identity with giving gentle, loving care to other beings and rescuing beings from harm and trouble. But the one who liberates themselves internally becomes a sort of lighthouse of rescue for all of time, shining in the origin of being. So this is transcendental, right? This is actually our nature, is to be thus. It's beautiful. Most of the actually profound aspects of this strange word that humans bandy about, this word truth, which in our time has come to be associated mostly with bullshit. Those forms of truth are self-exceeding. They are more than merely explosive. Truth is a star in the sky of being. It's a direction, a dimension. It is itself perhaps a being, but a non-ordinary being. Infinite, layered infinities. Not statements, including this one. That form of truth is primarily representational, though like the hawk's shadow, it can point to its origin. Us poor, trapped humans, we eat the shadows of our personal identity and grow ever hungrier in the process. When we are the fruit we seek, everything is this fruit, we are divided from it by the thing we're afraid will go away. See, the potential of the ironic counterpose is very deep. I'm grateful when the sound of the machines recedes and the sounds of the birds. Replace it. Wind in the trees, the bubbling of the stream, the rushing of the waters, the waves on the shore, their perfect rhythms. These are truth alive for me. In the eye of a dragonfly or a bee, I have seen worlds so beyond what all the humans are fascinated by and represent, chase the representations of. The living beings are more true than all the statements ever made, even one of them. I adore them. I am of them. They are my people. I am their child. I am their protector, however flawed I may be. Enough speaking for today. I wish you bliss and liberation, amazing dreaming, beautiful relationships, and the fulfillment of the promises of your human incarnation, stay and all your days. May the divine beings shine upon you with love and ferocious deprisoning. I often say, I am your friend, you are my heart. We are each other's medicine, and it is powerful. Take a moment to comment, if you will, ask a question, tickle the algorithm, buy me a coffee if you're so inclined. I'll give back 10 times whatever you contribute. And we will grow and learn and unforget together again very soon. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to new explorations. Much love. Peace for now.